The release of House of Spoils brought our 5th and final Blumhouse movie of the year, so it's time to go back, rank all 5 of them from my least favorite to my favorite. Welcome Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of Blumhouse horror films this year. Do you like them? Do you not like them? Or are they somewhere in the middle? How would you rank them from your least favorite to your favorite? Or if you just were avoiding them like the plague, make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if it is beneficial to you, and you can join in the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. And getting into last place, we have Night Swim. Now the best part might be some of the acting, but going about throughout the story, it's just not too compelling. The dialogue and the writing as a whole just feels very forced, very plagued. There are certain elements where it starts to dive into this cultural revelation, certain lore behind the horror elements that are including what's going on in the swimming pool, but overall it's an unexciting film that goes about uninteresting characters. While Russell may be one of the leading parts of the film, but even he can't really sell too much of what is going on to the nature, the lore of the film, that once they really get into it, the slow build-up is just not naturally grounded into what you're building up to, which really takes you into things of bad dialogue that mentions swimming pool now and then again, like it's something that people usually say on the whim, and so it feels like it just doesn't land with its own earnings. And at number 4 we have House of Spoils. Now this has an interesting premise to begin with, sort of mixing Hocus Pocus with the Bear series, and what you're getting out of that has its own little grounds to work in its own gestures, but doesn't fully go on to sell its own premise, build upon its culture. It takes a slow ground way to build upon its plot, and while certain moments, certain parts of what they're doing with the camera work can be compelling, the main character, what we get of Adrienne DeMose, she's a good actress for what she's pulling off, but she's not always the character you can cheer for. She's a little bit more of a jerk. What she's pulling off with the kitchen doesn't have too much that ends up being redeemable by the end. There are certain horror tropes that doesn't make it as compelling, and especially what we get out of the culture, it sort of comes too late into the film and becomes underdeveloped alongside the characters that are all developing within the story. And while it is having its own component of the story that brought me in, got me a little bit more intrigued, it doesn't fully sell itself at the end of the day. And at number 3 we have Afraid, an AI film that by its own nature becomes more familiar because they're tackling certain AI elements of today's culture, what we know of AI today, and it uses components that is putting AI in film, which can be a little bit of a downer on what you're wanting to put for the real art, which you kind of can make sense of it because that's what they're exactly touching on. But there's been many other good horror films that are based on AI, how it's taken over, but this one for me, I actually kind of enjoyed the general gist of it. I didn't go in knowing what to expect, what the trailers were all about. I saw some negative reviews, but still went into it, and it was rather surprising to some elements that it introduced. It didn't take huge risks, but there were some things that I was rather surprised by where it went with the film. Certain things where it hacked into phones, hacked into different computers, and you sort of suspect little details to come about along the way. Certain parts where it's predictable by the horror elements, but still managed to intrigue me, and where it was going on, the twist near the end really got me engaged and managed to really sell the film a little bit, even if it wasn't overall a great film by certain parts of its writing that feels unnatural, what they're doing, speaking to the AI, the element of being so entertained by the idea of bringing AI, someone watching them over the day. So there were some good parts but there were, of course, some of the parts that just didn't feel like it was so naturally fit. And at number 2, we have Imaginary. Now, this one, it does have its downsides for being a film called Imaginary that doesn't necessarily explode with the imagination what it is like for a child to have the imagination to play with this teddy bear and to really explore the nature of what it looks like for a child making things up as they go along. It still has some good horror elements, still goes into interesting realms where there is a physical realm that it takes you into, has the interesting components to it, but it doesn't necessarily have all the right beats that always wins you over with the right writing or certain things where it pulls you along. Certain parts are predictable, certain parts can surprise me, but ultimately there's something that feels like it could earn itself a little bit more toward your favor if it had more of the imagination that they were asking out of what you're getting out of putting horror elements in this child's play toy. Which leads into number 1 of Blumhouse 2024, Speak No Evil. Now this one is so much better than some of the other ones that I just talked about, just going into the niches of what we're diving into horror. I didn't watch the original Speak No Evil, the international version, before going into this, so I had no biases going into what I was exploring, and I did have a good time with it. I was surprised by the nature of different twists, certain things we're getting out of each family, and the idea of not trusting strangers, not getting yourself pulled into their house, and being brought now and then again with certain components where there's a slow build-up, but it slowly earns your favor because of the writing, what it's doing is its characters, the creepiness and questions you have that get answered with satisfactory with the nature of what you're getting out of this strangest family, and also having the right horror elements that feels grounded down to earth, yet also psychotic. James McAvoy especially is psychotic by the nature of what he pulls out of his performance, and just how that all leads up to its ending just manages to suck in the environment, build upon its own nature, what we're getting out of the scenery, the camera work, and just exploring the nature of this horror story as a whole based on a true story in its fullest extent. So just building upon those blocks manages to craft these characters that actually have these compelling motives, and being able to answer some questions with the culture that builds on throughout makes this my number 1 2024 Blumhouse horror film of the year. So that's just my ranking of the 2024 Blumhouse horror films. If you like this video, make sure to like this video, subscribe so you don't miss on any of the future 2024 horror rankings or rankings in general that I'll especially be going and building upon at the end of the year and beginning of the next year, because this is just the beginning of the 2024 ranking. So make sure to like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you haven't already to join in the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all, and make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.